Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's Talk Consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
Well, I'm doing great today, too. Thanks for asking. And we want to thank you all for tuning in. Today on the Voice of Yoga, we will talk about being that place where divine truth expresses itself, where the world sees you. Listen as we discuss understanding divine principle as the surrendering of personal sense by calling into expression the perfection of being. In this show, we will explain how the outer world of sense and the inner world of spirit become one when divine truth is the only consciousness. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and let divine truth shine through. Swami, the title of today's show is The Practice of Glorifying the Creator. What can you tell us about this title?
Yeah, I think what we want to focus on here is the idea of giving up that personal sense of self and knowing there is only one perfect divine life. And in order to do that, we must know ourselves in the way that we are created, which is spiritual. One of the things I grew up with was a saying, imitation is the highest form of praise. And then I researched it a little bit, and another saying, which is, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery that mediocrity can pay to greatness. That was from Oscar Wilde. What we're aspiring to in this show is the biblical idea of being perfect as your Father, where we are coming out of the belief in the many and into the understanding that there's only one perfect divine life.
Well, I was looking earlier for the definition of the word glorify, and then from Merriam-Webster, it says to honor or praise as divine. So in your mind, what would that look like when we're doing that?
Well, here, what we want to do, as we say, we use the testimony of our senses as the check engine light on the dashboard of consciousness. So you want to see what is appearing in your experience. Does it have these divine qualities? Peace, love, joy, goodness, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, patience, temperance. Because to be in spiritual identity is to be one with this divine creation. And in this oneness, there's no two-ness. So we want to get away from the idea of a mortal human being down here worshiping an immortal God up there. Because in that separation, this is where we are no longer able to live out from the principle of spiritual identity. When we have that separation, we are in the mental material recreation and we're hypnotized. And that entire experience runs on belief. We believe we were born. We believe we are growing old and we're changing. And so if we continue to do the same thing, which was insanity, doing the same thing, expecting a different return, which is where humanity is today. We're trying to fix everything at the material mental level. And what we don't have is any paradigm for how to do this spiritually. Because if we don't have a proper sense of the infinite, if we don't understand our divine self, we don't understand the dynamics of oneness and the perfection of being, then we won't have the capability to be able to demonstrate this divine law with any kind of certainty.
We have a soundbite from Herb Fitch, and this is from Realization of Oneness, Class 2B. I think we should play that now.
Yeah, and if anybody's interested in getting the full audio file or the entire program, you can get this at mysticalprinciples.com, and I'll play it.
If you'll relax in one moment, all your struggle is over. I will go before you. I will perform and perfect all that concerneth thee. Why don't you accept your immortal life now, in all its purity, knowing that whatever is impure is not you? That's what it's saying. But the controversy between mind and soul continues as the controversy among the Jews in this part of the Bible. Now, about the midst of the feast, Jesus went up into the temple and taught. There are some now who are prepared to receive. In you there is a readiness to accept the immortal life. And when the time is ready, it comes forth. The Jews marveled, saying, How knoweth this man letters, having never learned? You see, they expected that only an MIT graduate, or a doctor of philosophy at Harvard, or that type would be able to give them truth. After all, these were learned scribes and Pharisees. Who ever heard of a simple man knowing truth? But that is because they mistook the nature of truth. They thought of truth as something scientific or cultural or educational. But truth is pure life. Life is truth. Your life is the truth. It has nothing to do with these added things of the world that we pin on ourselves. That's why it comes out of the simplicity of Galilee. And so Jesus answered them and said, My doctrine is not mine, but his that sent me. Now every word then spoken in this Bible means that it is not spoken by Jesus. Whenever you say Jesus said, you don't mean Jesus said at all. Because Jesus has just said, My doctrine is not mine, but his that sent me. Who sent him? The life of God speaks the words, and Jesus is talking to human sense. The life of God is saying every word spoken by Jesus Christ. My doctrine is not mine, but his that sent me. But what about the Pharisees and scribes? Could they say the same? What about your mind? Can it say the same? Isn't your doctrine the doctrine of your mind? Isn't it the world mind functioning as your doctrine? But when you find Christ in you, whose doctrine do you have? The doctrine of him that sent me. When you find Christ in you, you have the Word of God. When you speak from a human mind, you don't have the doctrine of him that sent you. And so you have the tare growing right along with the wheat, and you make the mistake of following the doctrine of the human mind, which looks very appealing. But it isn't the doctrine of your immortal life, it's the doctrine of your mortal sense of life. And so we follow the doctrine of our mortal sense, and we perish with it. Whereas the immortal life of you is present with its doctrine of truth, of life eternal, of reality, and ever ordaining itself through you as you learn to be a Galilean, meek unto that inner word of the immortal self. My doctrine is not mine, but him that sent me. Whatever I, Jesus Christ, do on this earth, say on this earth, demonstrate on this earth, is God being manifest. There's nothing personal here. You don't have to wait for a second coming. The Christ in you is there waiting to demonstrate the doctrine of the Father here and now. And your immortal life is that Christ. He's revealing that when you have accepted immortal life, the doctrine of God in you is done. His will is done. His word is made flesh. His word has become the bread and the truth and the life and the water and the wine of your life. His substance is your substance. His mind is your mind. His power is your power. His unlimitation is your unlimitation. Because the doctrine of Christ in you is the word of the Father. His omnipotence, his omnipresence, his omniscience flow forth, expressing his life where you appear.
Swami, in the beginning of that soundbite, he talks about becoming the immortal self. Is that what we're talking about? Like in the title of a show, and said, practice the glorifying of God?
Yeah, the idea of imitation is the highest form of praise. And in here, we want to realize that we're not imitating or trying to become spiritual. We're letting go of the belief we're not, that our true identity, our true self is spirit, one with this divine, perfect, creative principle. It's the false sense of self, where he talks John 12:44 and 45. I'll read it. Jesus cried and said, He that believeth on me believeth not on me, but on him that sent me. and he that seeth me seeth him that sent me. And Joel Goldsmith wrote this under the heading of metaphysical healing. And I'll read this. There is only one answer to the question, what is God? And the answer is, I am. God is the mind and the life of the individual. Any mental hedging or inner reservation on this subject will result in ultimate failure. There is but one universal I, whether it is being spoken by Jesus Christ or John Smith. When Jesus revealed, he that sees me sees him that sent me, he was revealing a universal truth or principle. There must be no quibbling about this. You either understand this truth or you do not. And if you do not, there is no need for you to seek any further reason for failure to heal. The revelation of Jesus Christ is clear. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Unless you can accept this as a principle and therefore as the truth about you and about every individual, you have no foundation upon which to stand. The truth is that God is the mind and the life of the individual. God is the only I. End of quote. Yes, so as we start to drill down with this information and we start to employ it, the idea of glorifying God becomes more of what Mary Baker Eddy had with her revelation of divine egoism, where all of a sudden you realize that it is just one life looking at itself, as itself, of itself, and to itself.
I have a curiosity, Swami. I'm wondering if people believe that if they give thanks to God, that's the same as glorifying God. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, again, all of this comes under the heading of the old theology, the idea of becoming a good human being. And as you start to understand divine law as a principle, and you come out of the limitations of the law of karma, and you realize there really isn't any benefit to being a good human because God doesn't reward good humans, and in the same way, God doesn't punish bad humans. This is all part of this false sense of existence, the cycle of death and rebirth, the belief in two powers that we want liberation from. And a big part of doing that is this path of knowledge, understanding how it's working, and then understanding what it is I am going to be required to do because I have to give up the personal sense of self.
Would we go about our daily lives with the thought that God is all, and then maybe asking for guidance that whatever I do in God's name? Is that helping us kind of pave the way to glorify the Creator?
Well, I think we really have to educate our thought up to this. I mean, you start somewhere. You start by being a good human being. You start by following the rules as literal commandments for my behavior. But if that's as far as you go, there's really not that much benefit. The real benefit comes in knowing the truth, not thinking about the truth, not even believing in the truth. There's a little bit of benefit to this, but unless we really go the distance, I really like that example Herb Fitch gave us, the idea of going to a fine restaurant and reading the menu. And if that's as far as you go, you're going to walk away hungry.
Well, we're going to pause right here to hear a word from our sponsor. So listeners, we'll be back with you in just a few moments. Kriya Yoga Theory 2 is a unique and revolutionary practice and forum designed to facilitate the growth process in human development. Apotheosis is a real experience and has an evidence procedure. You cannot lead someone to permanent change by doing for them what they must do themselves. Personal accountability and responsibility are the foundation of Kriya Yoga Theory 2. You must be engaged and devoted. Prana power brings virtue to overcome fear. wisdom to overcome ignorance, purpose to overcome selfishness, enthusiasm to overcome laziness. Kriya Yoga is a path of action, knowledge, and devotion. These sessions are a celestial positioning system to guide the individual into union with the divine. For more information or to sign up for your next session online, go to www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste. Welcome back. For those who are just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So, Swami, getting back to my question, in that Joel Goldsmith quote that you had said earlier, Jesus reveals, "He that sees me sees him that sent me." I think that's really a key point here, because I take that to mean, like in my everyday life, I should be looking at everything, everyone, everything I see, hear, and touch. I have to come to the realization that that is God. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, exactly. And as we start to use this as a discipline or as an exercise, you begin to see how it works. Consciousness is experience. And if you keep your mind in constant relation with the divine idea that there's only one perfect divine life, and you keep the testimony of your material senses in the foreground, work from your understanding of divine mind. We know we have divine mind. And then from there, we know that any person, place, or thing that is appearing in our experience or even in our awareness, we know that this did not come from divine mind. And so we treat it differently. We treat it as an imposter. We treat it as an intruder. And the idea of judge righteously is to see the divine creation and the divine creation only.
Yeah, I love when he says the truth is that God is the mind and life of the individual. God is the only I. And like you've been saying all along for years, we have to get past this personal sense of what we think the I is. And it's not us, it is God.
Yeah, and this is exactly what Ames Knoll did with his book on Mary Baker Eddy, Revelation of Divine Egoism. There's only one God and his idea. And as we come out of the blind superstitions of Orthodox religion and let go of the belief in a human down here and a God up there, which we worship, we learn to let the inner light of spirit dissolve the false sense of a separate person and accept only one life. And then we start to see in accepting and living in the knowledge of this infinite spiritual self, it takes care of what seems to be a personal sense of self here on earth.
We have another soundbite from Herb Fitch, again from Realization of Oneness, Class 2B, and maybe we could play that for our listeners.
Yeah, and if anybody is interested in getting the full audio file or the entire program, you can get this at mysticalprinciples.com, and I'll play it.
My doctrine is not mine, but him that sent me. This is what the immortal life of you says to the mortal mind of you, which hears not. If any man will do his will, he shall know of the doctrine, whether it be of God or whether I speak of myself. When the will of your immortal life is expressing, there's never a question. Everything is ordained. There's no opposition. It all fades away like snow. Everything must melt when your immortal life speaks. And that's how you know it's of God, because it is infallible. Whatever it does perfectly, because it is ordained. It bringeth forth the will of the Father. And our human will, which fails so often, is simply separated. It's just a mental image walking forth, doing things which are not coming from the substance of the immortal self of your own being. That detachment from the immortal self makes the mortal self walk forward, unprotected, ungoverned, undirected, not a child of God. That's the prodigal. All mortality is the prodigal. The moment you have accepted immortality as the self of your life now, prodigal is turned home. The calf, the fatted calf, is the fullness of God expressing through that immortal life acceptance. If any man will do his will, he shall know of the doctrine. Now he that speaketh of himself seeketh his own glory, but he that seeketh his glory that sent him, the same is true, and no unrighteousness is in him. Your immortal self does not glorify a person. It does not glorify human flesh. It does not glorify personal status. It glorifies the Father. Only in your immortal self are you walking in the kingdom of God on earth, expressing the perfection of that kingdom. And when you find you're still thinking of personal glory, you will know you're living in your sense of mortal self, which is separated from the immortal self of you, which glorifies only the Father. You know, the human mind can twist that around many ways. But if I do good out here, doesn't that glorify the Father, says the human mind. No, it doesn't glorify the Father at all. The Father isn't depending on you or me to do any good. The immortal self activates itself, does its own work. I perform, I perfect. Of your own self, you can do nothing. Oh, that's a terrible blow to the ego. But once you've conquered that ego, you find that whatever your infinite, invisible, immortal self does is satisfying, and it isn't built on a house of sand. It doesn't crumple. Nothing makes it totter. It is permanent. It is anchored in eternity. It is ordained by infinity. It is governed by the law of eternal love. It is real.
I think Herb Fish makes a lot of great points in this soundbite, but I especially like that he's telling us what does not glorify the Creator. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, because anytime we even believe that we are a separate entity, we violate spiritual law, the law of oneness, one perfect divine life. And if we accept division in any way, shape, or form, then we fracture that law and we drop back down into division, the law of karma, the belief in two powers. And that's the cycle of death and rebirth. And what we're really aspiring for here is liberation. And we can't do it with the mind that we're using to get us through this lifetime, because that mind works on duality. It works in contrast. It divides whatever it is that it perceives. And so we have to think differently. And in our accepting spiritual identity, in our initially belief that there is only one life, and then we become a faithful witness to that. And as you start to experience this, the beauty of it is that the light, the spiritual light of truth will dissolve the darkness of this ignorance of the separate self, the belief in a second life.
Swami, when you were just talking, I was reminding myself of the scene in the Bible where Thomas falls to his knees when he sees Jesus Christ, with the wounds in the hands and in his side, and he finally realizes what the Christ really means.
Right. And that's exactly what I think we're all aspiring to, is when this truth illuminates our thought and reveals there is no sin, sickness, suffering, disease, lack, limitation, that the divine creation is right here, it's right now, and it's functioning. But we must have eyes to see it, and we must come out of the belief in the testimony of the material senses and start to develop this relationship. And as we begin to trust what is invisible and intangible to our material senses as a present help. And I think to further expand on this, I have something from Joel Goldsmith in his letters, and I'll read it. Illumination dissolves all material ties and binds men together with the golden chains of spiritual understanding. It acknowledges only the leadership of the Christ. It has no ritual or rule but the divine, impersonal, universal love. No other worship than the inner flame that is ever lit at the shrine of spirit. This union is the free state of spiritual brotherhood. The only restraint is the discipline of soul. Therefore, we know liberty without license. We are a united universe without physical limits, a divine service to God without ceremony or creed, the illumined walk without fear, by grace. End of quote. And again, the way that we begin to practice this glorifying the Creator is recognizing the difference between my will and thy will. That if I do things from this personal sense of self, and I am not conscious of the divine truth, that if I lift my arm, I can do it for good or for bad. But if I am conscious of the divine creation, and I come out of the belief in this personal sense of self, and I let divine truth move my arm, then it can only be moved for good, for absolute good. And then you start to see that your experiences are now starting to be imbued with this win-win experience for everyone that you're conscious of. It's not just good for me and not so good for them, but you start to see the divine qualities appearing in your external experiences.
Well, we do have a Bible verse here that I think would be wonderful to talk about. And this is from 1 Corinthians 6:19-20. Would you like to read that for our listeners?
Yeah, I'll read it. What? Know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost, which is in you, which ye have of God, and ye are not your own? For ye are bought with a price. Therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. End of quote. Yeah, see, here we really have to understand that the physical form that I am thinking is me, is my personal sense of self, is not what Paul's talking about here. He's talking about your divine self, the divine idea. And if we can come out of the belief in the false material sense of life and start to accept, I am the body of God. I am the manifestation of an indestructible principle. Then you have a whole different perspective. In this new perspective, you start to understand the oneness. There's only one body. There aren't 11 billion people on the planet. There's only one life. There's only one body. And it's held, controlled, and governed by the divine law of absolute harmony. And then realize when you see sickness, suffering, disease, lack, limitation, war, all of these things that are appearing in this mental material concept, you know that they're not real. They're not ordained by the divine law. And your fidelity to this divine truth must begin to resolve things into thoughts and exchange the objects of sense for the divine idea. We must reveal the truth. And this is a big part of what we're learning, is how to prove the presence of the divine creation, because talking about this, believing in it, doesn't go far enough.
Well, it's that time to start breaking down our show for today. So listeners, be sure to visit the website, www.ipdtransform.com. On the homepage, when you see the fading banner Blog Talk Radio, clicking it directs you to its catalog page. Click the Products tab, Online Classes, and that directs you to all the classes that Swami has available. Any final thoughts about today's show, Swami?
Well, I would like to encourage people to join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and let divine truth shine through. Namaste.
Thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. I'm Lisa Winton, along with Swami Jayananda, signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.